Not a single hand was raised for him until a wheelchair-bound veteran did something unthinkable. The autumn morning painted Atlanta's skyline in shades of amber and gold, but Officer Sarah Collins had no time to admire the view. Her fingers moved with practiced precision over Max's tactical harness, checking each strap and clip. The Belgian Malinois stood perfectly still, his dark eyes focused on her hands, waiting for the routine he knew by heart. "All set, partner?" Sarah's voice carried the warmth she reserved only for Max. The dog's tail wagged once, a controlled movement that spoke of his professional restraint. 6 years of working together had created a bond that transcended the usual K9 partnership. Max wasn't just her partner, he was her sixth sense, her guardian, her family. The call came through at 8:47 a.m. Possible synthetic drug lab, abandoned industrial complex on West Side. Security reported suspicious activity and chemical smell. Sarah felt Max tense beside her, already alert to the shift in her posture. This was their specialty, drug detection in compromised structures. The industrial complex loomed before them like a concrete giant, its broken windows staring down like hollow eyes, paint peeled from the walls in long strips, revealing decades of neglect. Sarah noticed Max's nostrils flaring as he caught the first traces of whatever waited inside. "Clear the first floor first, buddy." Sarah's command was barely a whisper, but Max's ears twitched in response. They moved in perfect sync, her boots and his paws nearly silent on the debris-strewn floor. The morning sun filtered through the broken windows, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow that made every corner seem alive. Max worked methodically, his black and tan coat a stark contrast against the grey concrete. Sarah watched his every movement, reading the subtle changes in his body language. 6 years of partnership had taught her to trust his instincts more than any human intelligence. The first floor yielded nothing but empty rooms and scattered debris. But as they approached the stairs to the second level, something changed. Max's ears suddenly pricked forward, his body becoming rigid with attention. Sarah recognized the shift. He had caught something significant. Before she could tighten her grip on the leash, Max bolted toward the stairs. His powerful legs carried him up 2 steps at a time, following a scent or sound that Sarah couldn't detect. "Max, wait!" Her command came too late. The next few seconds unfolded in slow motion. A shadow moved on the second floor, drawing Max's attention. The dog lunged forward, his training driving him to apprehend the suspect. Sarah saw a flash of movement, heard the metallic click that would haunt her dreams. The floor beneath Max gave way with a horrific screech of metal. Sarah's heart stopped as she watched her partner disappear through the collapsing structure, only to be caught in a twisted web of metal and concrete. Max hung suspended over a 4-story drop, his powerful body trapped in the debris. "Officer Collins to dispatch. K9 officer down. Need immediate rescue support." Sarah's voice cracked as she called for backup, her eyes never leaving Max. The dog wasn't whimpering or struggling. His training kept him still, but she could see the fear in his eyes. The response from dispatch hit her like a physical blow. All rescue units currently deployed to major fire downtown. No immediate support available. Can you maintain position until units are freed up? Sarah's mind raced through options. The structure holding Max groaned ominously, small pieces of concrete breaking free to shatter on the floors below. She couldn't wait for backup. Max didn't have that kind of time. Outside, a crowd began to gather. Phones emerged like flowers after rain, all pointed upward to capture the drama. Sarah saw the pitying looks, heard the murmurs of concern, but not a single person stepped forward to help. Max's occasional whimpers echoed through the building, each sound cutting through Sarah like a knife. The structure shifted again, dropping several inches. Max let out a yelp that Sarah had never heard before, a sound of pure fear that shattered her professional composure. "Someone help!" she shouted to the growing crowd. "Please!" Movement at the edge of the crowd caught her attention. A wheelchair pushed through the onlookers. its occupant's face set in grim determination. The man was probably in his 40s, his military bearing evident despite his seated position. Scars marked one side of his face, telling stories of battles fought and survived. Sergeant James Cooper, ma'am, Demolitions and Structural Specialist, Afghanistan. His voice carried the weight of command, even from his wheelchair. That support won't hold much longer, but I can help, if you'll trust me. Sarah looked from the veteran to her trapped partner, then back to the crowd of spectators. Max let out another whimper, and she made her decision. Sometimes trust wasn't a choice, it was the only option left. The structure groaned again, and pieces of concrete rained down into the darkness below. Sarah watched the veteran's eyes assess the situation with military precision, and she saw something there that gave her hope, the same unwavering dedication she recognized in Max's eyes every day. "Tell me what you need, Sergeant," Sarah said, her voice finding its strength again. Above them, Max remained still, his training holding even in the face of terror. Sarah silently promised him what she had promised every day for 6 years. "Whatever happens, we face it together." The sun continued its climb in the Atlanta sky, illuminating the scene like a spotlight on a stage. But for Sarah, the whole world had narrowed to 3 points. Her partner suspended in the air, a veteran in a wheelchair offering impossible hope, and the ticking clock of a structure that wouldn't hold forever. The real question wasn't whether she should trust this stranger. It was whether she could live with herself if she didn't try everything possible to save Max. The answer to that question had been written in her heart 6 years ago, when a Belgian Malinois puppy first looked into her eyes and claimed her soul as his own. The radio crackled with static, each mundane update about the downtown fire feeling like a personal betrayal. Sarah watched another piece of concrete break free and plummet into the darkness below, counting the seconds until it shattered. 4 floors. If Max fell, she'd lose him in 3.2 seconds. "First thing we need is support beams." Sergeant Cooper's voice cut through her spiral of fear. His wheelchair moved with precision through the debris, military training evident in every calculated movement. "There's enough material here, but we need to work fast." Sarah forced herself to look away from Max, scanning the ground floor. Industrial leftovers littered the space, metal pipes, construction beams, abandoned equipment. Above them, Max maintained his trained stillness, but his eyes never left Sarah. She could read the trust in them, the absolute faith that she would find a way to save him. "Your dog's got military-grade training," Cooper observed, his hands already testing the strength of a fallen beam. "The way he's staying still, that's not just police work." His eyes narrowed at the twisted metal trap holding Max. "This wasn't random. That's a professional snare setup, modified for heavy loads." Sarah's police instincts kicked in through her fear. She saw it now, the 2 clean cuts in the floor, the strategically weakened support beams. This was a trap, she breathed, anger replacing terror. They knew K9 units would investigate. 3 K9 units lost in structural accidents across the state this year, Cooper said grimly, confirming her suspicion. But no one connected the dots, because the buildings were all condemned anyway. His wheelchair stopped at a promising pile of metal. "We can use these to create a counterweight system." A series of sharp cracks echoed through the building. The floor beneath Max dropped another few inches. His whimper was barely audible, but it cut through Sarah like a physical pain. The crowd outside had grown, their phones still recording, their murmurs a distant buzz of useless sympathy. "Why are you helping?" Sarah asked as she helped Cooper position the first beam. Her arms strained against the weight, but his upper body strength was impressive, years of wheelchair life evident in his muscled shoulders. "In Afghanistan, we had a dog named Rex." Cooper's voice remained steady as they worked, but Sarah caught the flicker of old pain in his eyes. "Best bomb detector in the unit, saved my life 3 times before—" He paused, adjusting the angle of the beam. 4th time, he caught the IED trigger too late. Explosion paralyzed me, killed him instantly. Sarah saw the weight of memory in his scarred face. "I'm sorry. Don't be. Rex died doing his job." Cooper's hands never stopped moving, expertly knotting rope they'd found into a makeshift pulley system. But when I was in the hospital, I learned about other unit dogs. How Command sometimes saw them as equipment, expendable. His jaw tightened. Not today, not your Max. The sunlight had shifted, throwing long shadows across the debris-strewn floor. Sarah's police radio continuously updated the fire situation downtown. Still no units available. They were on their own, and time was running out. Cooper had transformed the scattered construction materials into something that looked almost professional. A network of ropes and beams created a precarious but calculated support system. Physics and leverage, he explained, testing the tension. In the field, we sometimes had to improvise rescue equipment. The principle's the same. Distribute the weight, create anchor points. Sarah watched him work, recognizing the same focused intensity she'd seen in military K9 handlers. His wheelchair moved like an extension of his body, each turn precise, each movement efficient. This was a man who had refused to let circumstances define his capabilities. "The next part's tricky," Cooper said, securing the last knot. "Someone needs to go up there. The ropes can support the weight, but it needs to be someone who can maneuver in tight spaces." He looked at Sarah. "And someone Max trusts completely." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She'd been avoiding this conclusion, that saving Max meant putting herself in the same precarious position. One wrong move could send them both plunging into the void. A new sound cut through the tension, the deep rumble of shifting concrete above them. Max let out a sharp bark, a warning. Sarah looked up to see new cracks spreading across the ceiling like spider webs. "Buildings settling," Cooper announced, his voice tight. "We've got minutes, not hours." He pressed a length of rope into Sarah's hands, his grip firm. "You've got one shot at this. The pulleys will help control your descent, but once you reach him—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew the risks. Sarah checked her harness one last time, her fingers finding the familiar buckles and clips. The same routine she'd performed on Max's harness countless times. Now a lifeline for them both. "Officer Collins." Cooper's voice made her turn. In the shadowy building, his scars seemed to shift with the playing light. "When you get up there, remember, trust your dog. Military dogs, police dogs, they've got instincts we can't match. If Max tells you something's wrong, you listen." Sarah nodded, her throat too tight for words. She looked up at her partner, still suspended in the failing structure. Max's eyes met hers, and in them she saw not fear, but that unwavering trust that had defined their partnership for 6 years. The crowd outside had fallen silent, perhaps sensing the gravity of what was about to happen. Sarah took one last look at Cooper, saw the ghosts of his own past reflecting in his determined expression. Then she gripped the rope, took a deep breath, and began her ascent into the darkness above. The chapter closed with Sarah suspended between earth and sky, moving toward her partner one careful handhold at a time. Below, a veteran haunted by his own lost companion guided her journey. Above, Max waited with the patience of absolute faith, and all around them, the building continued its ominous symphony of creaks and groans, counting down the moments until everything would either come together or fall apart. Sarah's muscles burned as she inched her way up the makeshift rope system. Each movement had to be precise. One slip could send both her and Max plummeting to the concrete below. The rough rope bit into her palms, but she welcomed the pain. It kept her focused, present, away from the vertigo-inducing drop beneath her feet. "Steady," Cooper's voice carried from below, calm and measured. "There's a support beam at your 2 o'clock. Use it to brace yourself before the next section." The beam was barely visible in the dusty half-light, but Sarah found it with her boot. As she secured her position, Max let out a low whine, not of pain but of warning. She froze, years of partnership telling her to trust that sound. "Something's wrong," she called down to Cooper. "Max is trying to tell us something." "Listen to him," Cooper replied instantly. "In Afghanistan, Rex always knew before we did. Always." His voice took on a distant quality, as if the memories were pulling him back to another time. Another rescue. Sarah hung suspended in the air, watching Max's eyes. The Belgian Malinois was focused on something above them. his ears forward, body tense despite his precarious position. Following his gaze, Sarah spotted movement in the shadows of the upper floor. "We've got company," she announced, keeping her voice low. "Someone's up there." Cooper's response was immediate and military sharp. "They're coming back to check their trap. Standard operator procedure, verify the kill." The bitterness in his voice spoke of personal experience. "In Kandahar, we lost 3 dogs before we figured out the pattern. They'd set the traps, wait, then return to clean up." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just about stopping drug detection. This was systematic elimination of K9 units. Her free hand instinctively moved toward her service weapon, but the motion caused the rope to sway dangerously. "Tell me about Kandahar," she said, partly to keep herself calm as she stabilized her position, partly because she sensed Cooper needed to share this story. Above her, Max remained perfectly still, his training holding even as the metal groaned around him. "It was my 3rd tour," Cooper began, his voice carrying clearly in the hollow building. "Rex and I were assigned to counter IED operations. He had this way of working, methodical, thorough, saved more lives than I can count." There was a pause, filled only by the creaking of stressed metal. "Then we started losing dogs. Professional hits, made to look like accidents. Rex knew something was wrong. He'd get agitated near certain buildings, try to warn us off. Sarah could hear him moving below, wheelchair wheels crunching over debris as he monitored the rope system. The day it happened, Rex was different, more insisted than usual about checking a particular route. I should have listened better." Cooper's voice tightened. He found the trigger mechanism, but there was a secondary device. Rex pushed me back. Last thing I remember is his eyes looking at me. No fear, just purpose. The story hit Sarah hard. She looked at Max, saw that same unwavering dedication in his eyes. These dogs, whether military or police, gave everything without hesitation. And now someone was systematically targeting them. A shadow moved again above them, closer this time. Sarah could hear the soft scrape of boots on concrete. Max's ears twitched, tracking the sound, but he maintained his disciplined silence. Years of training holding firm even in crisis. "There's more to your story, isn't there, Sergeant?" Sarah kept her voice low, both to avoid detection and to encourage confidence. Something about Cooper's tale felt unfinished, crucial. "After the explosion in the hospital, I started investigating." Cooper's voice had shifted, becoming harder. "Found a pattern. Military dogs being targeted, especially ones close to uncovering something big. Rex wasn't just finding IEDs. He'd stumbled onto a smuggling operation. Weapons, drugs, moving through supposedly cleared buildings." The pieces started clicking into place in Sarah's mind. And now, similar accidents are happening here, to police dogs close to making major drug busts. Same tactics, different continent. Cooper's wheelchair squeaked as he adjusted something in the rope system. "They learn from military experience, adapt it for civilian operations. The trap that caught Max, that's a modified version of what they used in Kandahar." The shadow above moved again, closer to Max. Sarah's heart rate spiked, but she forced herself to remain still. One wrong move now could give away her position and doom them both. "Rex died because I missed the signs," Cooper continued, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Spent 3 years after that tracking the cell responsible. From my wheelchair, I mapped every incident, every accident. They built a case file that nobody wanted to see. Military dogs, police dogs, to them it was just equipment loss." Sarah felt a surge of cold anger. Max wasn't equipment. He was her partner, her protector, her family. The thought of someone systematically targeting these loyal animals made her blood boil. The metal holding Max creaked ominously. Sarah was close enough now to see the ingenious cruelty of the trap, designed to hold just long enough for help to arrive, then catastrophically fail. They were expected to watch, helpless, as Max fell. In the hospital, Cooper's voice pulled her back to the moment. "Rex visited me every day for weeks, just sat beside my bed, head on my lap. The nurses said it was impossible. He died in the explosion. but I felt him there, staying with me until I was strong enough to carry on his work. Sarah absorbed this revelation in silence. She'd heard similar stories from other handlers, the unbreakable bond between human and dog transcending even death. Looking at Max, she knew she'd move heaven and earth to prevent him from becoming another statistic. The shadow above was almost directly over Max now. Sarah could hear the soft click of what sounded like a camera, documentation of their handiwork. Her muscles trembled from the sustained tension of hanging in the harness, but she forced herself to remain motionless. "That's why you're here today," she said softly, understanding flooding through her. "You're not just helping Max, you're finishing what Rex started. Every dog we save," Cooper's voice was steel and sorrow combined, "is a victory for those we lost. Rex died protecting me. Now it's my turn to protect them." A piece of concrete broke free from above, plummeting past Sarah into the darkness below. The sharp crack of its impact echoed through the building like a gunshot. Max's ears flattened, but he held his position, trusting Sarah completely. She was close enough now to see the details of the trap, to understand its lethal engineering. And in that understanding came the terrifying realization: they weren't just racing against a failing structure. They were caught in the middle of an operation years in the making, with unknown watchers above, evaluating their every move. The chapter ended with Sarah suspended in this terrible knowledge, Max's life hanging literally in the balance, and Cooper below, a guardian angel in a wheelchair fighting his own war against shadows from the past. The building groaned again, a sound like distant thunder, counting down the moments until all their secrets would collide in a reckoning long overdue. The figure above moved with practiced efficiency, a shadow among shadows. Sarah's arms burned from holding position, but she didn't dare move. Through the dusty half-light, she could now see the trap's full complexity. Metal teeth disguised as structural supports, tension cables masked as building wires. This was military-grade engineering, turned against those it was designed to protect. "Sarah," Cooper's whisper carried up to her, urgent but controlled. "The main support beam is starting to buckle. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to be now." Max's ears twitched at Cooper's voice, but his eyes remained locked on the shadow above them. Sarah had never seen him so still, so focused. Even in their most dangerous operations, he'd always maintained a quiet confidence. Now she saw real fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "I count 2 of them up there," she breathed into her radio, keeping her voice just above a whisper. "They're documenting something." "Standard procedure," Cooper replied grimly. "They record the accidents for training purposes. In Kandahar, we found a whole archive of—" He cut off abruptly. "Movement at your 6 o'clock." Sarah felt it before she saw it. A subtle change in the air pressure, the whisper of tactical gear against concrete. Someone was rappelling down behind her. The choice she'd been dreading had arrived. She could only protect one side. Either keep her position facing Max, or turn to confront the threat at her back. Max made the decision for her. His bark echoed through the building, not his usual alert, but 3 sharp sounds in quick succession, their danger signal used only in the most critical situations. Sarah released one rope and swung around, her body moving on pure training and trust. The motion brought her face to face with a masked figure less than 10 feet away. In his hand, something glinted dully, not a weapon, but a control device. "They're going to trigger a secondary collapse." Cooper's voice was tight with recognition. "Same setup that killed Rex. Get to Max now." Sarah didn't hesitate. She pulled her backup knife from her boot and slashed through the rope, holding her in position. The controlled fall brought her directly to the twisted metal surrounding Max. Up close, she could see how the trap had been engineered to hold, then fail catastrophically. Every groan and shift of the building had been calculated. "Easy, boy," she whispered, reaching for him. Max's body trembled under her touch, but his training held. Above them, she heard the soft click of the control device activating. The building shuddered, not the gradual settling they'd felt before, but a deliberate sequence of structural failures. Pieces of ceiling began raining down around them as hidden charges detonated, each one precisely placed to bring down this section of the building. "Sarah!" Cooper's voice cut through the chaos. "The secondary support won't hold. You've got 30 seconds at most." Her fingers worked frantically at the metal pinning Max, but it was designed not to yield. Each piece she moved revealed another layer of entanglement. Max whined softly, not in pain, but in warning. He could feel the structure failing beneath them. The masked figure had disappeared back into the shadows, their work done. The building would collapse, taking all evidence with it. Another tragic accident in a condemned structure. Sarah felt tears of frustration burning her eyes as the trap refused to release its grip on Max. "Talk to me, Cooper," she called down, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You've seen this before. How do we beat it?" "The release point," Cooper replied, his military training evident in his calm tone. "These traps always have one. They need to be able to retrieve evidence if something goes wrong. Look for anything that doesn't match the building's age." Sarah's eyes scanned the twisted metal, forcing herself to look past the obvious tangles. There, a small mechanism near Max's shoulder, its metal too clean, too new. But reaching it meant putting her full weight on the failing structure. Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Concrete dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. Below, she heard Cooper moving something heavy, preparing for what would come next. Sarah. His voice had changed, carrying the weight of command. "When Rex and I were hit, I hesitated. Thought about protocol, about proper procedure. That hesitation cost him his life." A pause, filled with falling debris. "Don't make my mistake. Trust your instincts. Trust Max." The decision crystallized in her mind. Protocol would kill them both. Sarah took a deep breath, locked eyes with Max, and saw in them the same unwavering trust they'd shared for 6 years. "Cooper," she called down, her voice finding new strength. "Whatever happens next, thank you. For being here, for understanding. Just bring him home, Officer Collins. That's all the thanks I need." Sarah pulled herself fully onto the failing structure, feeling it shift ominously under her weight. Max remained perfectly still, understanding the delicacy of their position. Her fingers found the release mechanism, but it refused to move. Another explosion, and the floor beneath them dropped several inches. Sarah felt the vibrations of imminent collapse running through the metal. They had seconds, not minutes. Max's eyes met hers again, and in them she saw something that stopped her breath. The same look Cooper had described seeing in Rex's eyes that last day in Kandahar. Not fear, but absolute certainty. Purpose. The building screamed around them, a sound of tortured metal and shattering concrete. Sarah made her choice. Instead of trying to disarm the trap, she wrapped her arms around Max's body, pulling him close, despite the metal between them. "Together," she whispered in his ear. Like always. The chapter ended with Sarah and Max suspended in that moment of decision, the building crumbling around them, and Cooper below, waiting to see if history would repeat itself, or if this time, somehow, loyalty and love would prove stronger than the engineering of hate. The next few seconds would determine everything, and the clock had just run out. Time slowed to heartbeats. Sarah felt each one pound against her chest as she held Max, the metal trap still biting into his body. The building shuddered around them, a cascade of explosions moving closer. Through the dust and chaos, she heard Cooper's voice rise with military precision. "The support cables, they're not part of the trap, their original structure. Follow them down to the anchor point." Sarah's eyes tracked the thick cables disappearing into the darkness below. They'd assumed everything in the area was part of the trap, but Cooper's trained eye had spotted what everyone else missed. These cables, black with decades of industrial grime, had once supported heavy machinery. Another explosion rocked the building. Sarah felt the trap mechanism shift, and suddenly she understood. The explosions weren't just for collapse. They were systematically removing all evidence of the trap's military origins. But they couldn't blow the main support cables without bringing down the entire structure immediately. "Max," she whispered, her lips close to his ear, We're going to do something crazy, partner. Ready? The Belgian Malinois responded with the slightest tail movement, their signal for absolute trust. Sarah pulled her backup knife again and began sawing at the ropes holding them to the trap mechanism. If she was right, the support cables could take their weight just long enough. "Cooper!" she called down. "Remember how you said these guys learned from military experience?" She cut through another rope, feeling the structure shift beneath them. Well, they forgot something basic. Never assume your enemy hasn't read the same manual. Above them, a shadow moved, the masked figure returning to check their handiwork. Sarah heard the sharp intake of breath as they realized their targets weren't following the script. "Sarah," Cooper's voice carried urgency now. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast. The next charge will bring down the east wall. You'll have about 3 seconds after the flash." She cut the last rope, holding them to the trap. Now only the tangled metal around Max kept them in place. Sarah took one deep breath, wrapped her arms more securely around her partner, and whispered, "Cooper, thank you for helping us finish what Rex started." The flash came right on schedule. Sarah pushed off hard, using the explosion's force to break free of the weakened trap. For one endless moment, they were in free fall. Max's body tensed against hers, but he didn't struggle. Together they plummeted toward the support cables. Sarah's hands found the thick cable an instant before impact. Pain shot through her shoulders as their combined weight jerked to a stop. Max whimpered once, not from fear, but from the metal pieces still embedded in his tactical vest. The masked figure above them shouted something, and more explosions rocked the building. But they were already sliding down the cable, gravity doing what careful planning couldn't. Sarah felt the heat of detonations behind them, heard the crack of gunfire as their attackers realized their targets were escaping. "Incoming!" Cooper's shout was followed by the distinctive sound of metal hitting concrete. Through the dust cloud, Sarah saw what the veteran had done. His wheelchair was positioned perfectly, its reinforced frame wedged against fallen beams to create a landing zone clear of debris. They hit hard, Sarah taking the brunt of the impact. Max rolled free, immediately positioning himself between her and the upper levels, his training overriding any pain or fear. Above them, furious voices called out in a language Sarah recognized from military briefings. "Sarah!" Cooper's voice snapped her back to focus. "Second team coming in through the west entrance. They're not leaving witnesses this time." She pushed herself up, checking Max quickly. The tactical vest had protected him from the worst, but angry red marks showed where the trap had gripped him. His eyes met hers, alert and ready, despite everything. No time for proper first aid. They had to move. Cooper had already positioned himself covering the east entrance, his military training evident in every movement. Even in a wheelchair, he commanded the space like a veteran special forces operator. "Like Kandahar," he said grimly, "they'll try to herd us into a kill box. Standard tactic when the primary plan fails." His hands moved steadily over something in his lap, what looked like a small control unit of his own. "You came prepared," Sarah observed, drawing her service weapon. "Been tracking these cells for 3 years," Cooper replied. "Knew I'd only get one chance to catch them in action. Your Max did what Rex couldn't. He survived long enough for backup to arrive." Footsteps echoed from multiple directions now. Sarah counted at least 4 distinct sets, maybe more. They were surrounded, trapped in the killing ground between teams of professional killers. Max's low growl confirmed targets moving on both levels. "Sarah," Cooper's voice had changed, carrying the same tone she'd heard in his story about Rex. "When I said I spent 3 years tracking them, wasn't just gathering evidence." His hands finished whatever adjustment he was making. "Been rigging every potential target building in Atlanta with my own surveillance system, including this one." Understanding dawned as Sarah saw the tiny red lights blinking in the shadows. While the crowd watched from outside, while she and Max hung suspended, Cooper had been doing more than just helping with the rescue. He'd been activating a web of cameras and sensors. "Everything they did," he continued, a fierce smile crossing his scarred face. "Every explosion, every trap mechanism, it's all recorded. Multiple angles, military-grade footage. enough to prove this wasn't an accident. The footsteps were closer now. Sarah positioned herself behind a fallen beam, Max at her side. Cooper's wheelchair was angled to cover their blind spot, his years of combat experience evident in his chosen position. "But they'll still try to kill us," Sarah said, checking her ammunition. "Yes." Cooper's smile hadn't wavered. "That's exactly what we want them to do, because this time, they're not the only ones who brought backup." The chapter ended with the sound of multiple vehicles screeching to a halt outside. Not police cruisers, but the distinctive rumble of military transport. Sarah looked at Cooper and finally understood. This wasn't just about saving one dog. This was the culmination of a 3-year operation, planned by a veteran who had never stopped fighting, never stopped working to protect the partners who couldn't protect themselves. Max's ears pricked forward, his posture shifting from defense to alert. Through the dust and debris, Sarah heard what he'd already sensed, the rhythmic sound of tactical teams deploying and the unmistakable bark of military working dogs. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The next few minutes unfolded like a military operation, which, Sarah realized, was exactly what it was. Cooper's wheelchair-mounted control unit had done more than activate cameras. It had sent coordinates to a joint task force that had been waiting for exactly this moment. Through the dust-filled air, tactical teams moved with precision, their own K9 units leading the way. Belgian Malinois, German Shepherds and Dutch Shepherds, military working dogs now serving with federal agencies, swept through the building with focused intensity. 3 years, Cooper said, his voice carrying satisfaction. Took that long to identify everyone involved, track their movements, predict their patterns. His hands moved steadily over his control unit, feeding real-time data to the tactical teams. They thought they were hunting dogs, never realized they were being hunted themselves. The trapped strike team realized their situation too late. Max stayed close to Sarah, his body still showing the effects of the trap, but his focus unwavering. When one of the attackers tried to slip through a blind spot, Max's warning bark gave the tactical team crucial seconds to respond. "Like Rex would have done," Cooper said softly. "Some things you can't train. It's just who they are." The firefight was brief, but intense. The strike team had military training, but they weren't prepared for opponents who knew their playbook. Every escape route they tried had been anticipated, every fallback position already covered. As the dust settled, Sarah got a clear look at their attackers. The tactical gear was top-grade military issue, but with subtle modifications. These weren't just criminals. They were former military operators who had turned their skills against their own. Mercenaries, Cooper confirmed, started in Afghanistan, targeting military working dogs that got too close to their smuggling operations. When they moved stateside, they brought the same tactics. Figured no one would connect military dog losses overseas with K9 unit accidents here. Captain Martinez, the task force commander, approached their position. "Sergeant Cooper," she said, snapping a crisp salute. 3 years of surveillance paid off. We've got them all, the strike team, the support cell, and enough evidence to trace it back to their handlers. The evidence collection revealed the full scope. Cooper's surveillance system had captured everything. The setup, the trigger mechanism, even the moment Sarah and Max broke free. Combined with similar evidence from other sites, it painted a devastating picture. 27 dogs in 3 years, each one getting close to something bigger. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in dress uniform at a ceremony that brought together police K9 handlers, military dog handlers, and federal agents. Max sat perfectly at attention beside her. His injuries healed, but the experience marked in subtle changes to his behavior. More protective now, more aware of structural dangers, but his dedication hadn't wavered. Cooper sat in the front row as Captain Martinez presented the findings. 38 arrests, hundreds of millions in seized assets, and an international smuggling network exposed, all because one veteran had refused to believe his dog's death was an accident. Today, We honor not just the successful completion of Operation Silent Guardian, Martinez announced, but all the partners we lost along the way. Their sacrifices weren't in vain, and they weren't forgotten. She turned to Cooper. Sergeant James Cooper, your dedication to uncovering the truth about Rex's death led to the preservation of countless other lives. The President has authorized me to present you with the Distinguished Civilian Service Medal. As Cooper accepted the medal, every dog in the room, military and police alike, raised their muzzle and howled. It was a sound of mourning, of celebration, of brotherhood that transcended species. Max's voice rose with them, and Sarah felt the vibration through her boots. Later, at the memorial wall where new names had been added, every dog lost to the mercenaries' campaign, Sarah found Cooper near Rex's name, which held a place of honor. What happens now, she asked, watching Max interact with the other dogs, each one somehow changed by the events they'd survived. Now? Cooper smiled, his hand resting near Rex's name. Now we go back to work. Because that's what they taught us, Rex, Max, all of them. The job isn't done until everyone comes home safe. Max padded over and sat between them, his posture relaxed but alert. A veteran in a wheelchair, a police officer, and a Belgian Malinois, an unlikely team that had broken a killer's perfect record and brought down an international conspiracy. Sarah looked at Max, saw the same unwavering trust that had carried them through their darkest moment. Some called it loyalty or duty or training, but she knew better now. They called it love, and love, as Cooper had proved, was stronger than any trap ever built.